schmancy. Oh, they're, are these brand spanking new? Or they're just modified? I like it.
No, we had them a bit. They just.
You used to have to do them upside down. Okay. All right.
We'll get started. Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Marcy Scoggins, Chair of the Mississippi Charter School Authorizer Board. This regularly scheduled meeting of the Authorizer Board is being held today, Monday, October the 28th, 2024, at 1 p.m. The notice of this meeting, which included the date, time, place, purpose of the meeting, and identified the virtual attendance available to the public, has been posted. Oh, can y'all hear? Jennifer, can you hear us?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Are you hearing me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Okay. I just got here.
Okay, great. We're glad to have you, Sandra.
An audio recording is being made of this meeting, and the minutes of the meeting will also be recorded. This meeting is being called to order at 1:02 p.m. on Monday, October the 28th, 2024. At this point, we'll move on to the establishment of a quorum. As I call the names of the board members, please state the location of your presence for this meeting. Jay Carney.
Present. Jackson.
Felicia Gavin.
Present, Jackson, Mississippi.
Sandra McKiernan.
Present. Fernando, Mississippi.
Ben Morgan.
Present.
Candace Robbins.
Present in the boardroom.
Jennifer Whittier.
Present. Brookhaven, Mississippi.
And I'm Marcy Scoggins, and I'm also in the boardroom. A quorum is present for conducting a meeting. At this time, I'd like to ask that you join me for the Pledge of Allegiance and the invocation, followed by the reading of our mission. Dr. Felicia Gavin is going to lead us in this.
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let us pray. Gracious God, we thank you for this day, this perfect day that you have ordained. But we know it's not by happenstance that we are here. We thank you for your grace and we thank you for your mercy, God. New mercies every day. And God, as we go through this meeting, we pray that you would guide our thoughts, guide our decisions, and that all the decisions that we make will be beneficial to the children and administrators and teachers that we serve across this great state of Mississippi. Careful to always give you the praise, the glory, and the honor. In Jesus' name, amen.
Now, if y'all will join me in the reading of the mission of the board. The mission of the Mississippi, it's printed, I'm sorry, for the new members of the board, it's printed on your agenda.
On your agenda,
I
yes.
should have led with that. The mission of the Mississippi Charter School Authorizer Board is to authorize high-quality charter schools, particularly schools designed to expand opportunities for underserved students. At this point, I think we need to move to the adoption of today's agenda. We will need to amend the draft agenda to include new business item E for the board to consider approval of an amendment to cover our contract with Butler Snow. I will entertain a motion for the approval of the agenda with that amendment. Please identify yourself for the record. Is there a motion?
Jennifer Whittier, so moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any opposed? The motion carries. So I think now we will move to the approval of the minutes of the September 30th, 2024 special called meeting. You have received a copy of the September 30th meeting minutes. I will entertain a motion for approval. Please identify yourself for the record. Is there a motion for the approval of the minutes?
So moved.
Jennifer Whittier, so moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second, Jay Carney.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. So I just have a very brief chair report, if that's okay. I wanted to thank the staff and Dr. Karmacharya again for a wonderful event at the Westin last month. It was fantastic. It was great to see everybody and have so many people in the charter school community attend from, not only from the state, but also other states as well. We learned a lot and we had a great day. So thank y'all for that. I kind of hate to say this because I don't want y'all to run from the room, but I'm already looking forward to the next one. And I know that was a lot of work, so y'all don't head for the hills quite yet, but it was great. Thank y'all so much for all that you did. And getting so many folks in the same room at the same time is no small feat. There were also a whole lot of great discussions at that meeting. And as such, I have reached out to some other state agencies and folks just to see how we can better improve the things here. I want to visit with y'all about that. So I'll be following up with all of you on how we can move things in a positive direction for everybody. So we're looking forward to that. I'm obviously new at that, so we wanted to be sure that we're doing as much as we can, and as such, I asked that we include the Robert's Rules of Order for board member decorum and debate, and so those have been added to the table in case anybody has any questions. We'll be glad to discuss those with you at some point. So I think that's all I have. I'll recognize you for your executive director's report, please. ma'am.
Thank you, and welcome to everybody in the room. It's good to see everybody. I appreciate you coming and your interest in the work, as always. So I'll draw your attention, as usual, to the newsletter that's in your backup material and let you know just a few of the things that we've been working on over the past month. It seems like it's been a lot longer than that since we last saw you guys, but thank you, Marcy, for your kind words about the forum. A lot of you guys are in the room today that were at the forum, so thank you all for your attendance and your comments and your feedback. It's all been taken under consideration and thoughtful processing, and looking forward to, as you said, the next steps on that. Although it won't be next month, it will be down the road a little ways. So we've also been working on the frameworks. So performance frameworks should be ready for those schools in renewal in the next week or so. Then the rest of those will be forthcoming. The team, with the exception of Jordan, because she had a few things she had to do besides hold down the fort, we attended NACSA in Houston last week, and we were there for about 4 days. It was amazing. We had a great time. There was time for learning, time for connecting, time for networking, time for making new friends in the field, time for a little fun, and too much food. But it was great. So we really, really enjoyed that, and thank you for the opportunity to continue our professional development. I don't have a whole lot other than that. So I think that ends my report for the month, unless somebody has questions.
Houston?
Yes. And next year it will be in Houston too. And oddly enough, there's a direct flight. There's never a direct flight to anywhere from Jackson. You have to go through Atlanta or Dallas, but this one's straight there. So it was easy to get to and easy to get home.
Hopefully, you have the same luck next year.
We'll cross fingers.
Sometimes when you leave Jackson, you never exactly know
That's
what's going
right.
to happen. So
But thank you again. It was a great time.
thank y'all for representing us well. I know. I think now we'll recognize Denise DeRosset for our updated financial reports. Please, ma'am.
Noticed that I printed July's report for my copy instead of the correct report. So, but I do have notes, so I think I'm good. So if we have questions, I might have to. So I wanted to point out that the report this time, it just covers the 4 weeks from the last board meeting. $82,800. Most of those monthly expenses were for ongoing operating. But I did want to just point out that the expenses for the forum I wasn't exactly sure where in the budget line item to put those, so when you see them in the report, they're actually under the technical report line item. And it was also called the training line item. So that's where those were reported. It was also money, for all of the food is considered a commodity. So there's that commodity expenses are much higher this time because revenue came in from the 3% from the school. So everybody that was billed paid their money, and it has all been transferred to the state treasury, with the exception of one school that was given an extension, and that was Instant Impact. And so we have not yet received their money because of the extension that was granted. We've already noticed that there is a new agenda item, but I wanted to explain why we're asking for a contract amendment for the Butler Snow contract. There's been a lot of items legally before the board, and there's anticipation of a lot more coming. And so when we looked at that contract, it was started last January, and it was a whole lot of issues still before the board. And then the expenses that were associated with that contract was $65,000 initially. So we have noticed that we probably need to extend both the time frame of that contract as well as the dollar amount. And so I've worked with Butler Snow, talked to Tommy Carden to see what he anticipates. And so he and I talked about, and of course with consultation with Dr. Palmacheri, that we should extend that contract through the end of the fiscal year. So take us through June 30th and put it up to $130,000 for the entire contract period. And I wanted to point out that there is no need to change your budget for that at all. Most of the $65,000 that was in the original contract occurred in last fiscal year, 46,000 of it did. And so if we extend that contract and increase it, we'd already budgeted $100,000 in the current year, so we won't even spend the whole $100,000. So really what we're going to ask for in new business is for y'all to just approve the amendment for the time, extra money. That takes care of what you will be voting on, unless y'all have any questions about that. And then I just wanted to point out that y'all had a federal grant that came in from the U.S. Department of USDA.
USDE.
DE, I'm sorry, okay, DE, whichever one it is, okay, and it was almost $500,000, and we've already made 2 payments in this. They say it's done the drawdown, so everything is up to speed on that. We've made one additional payment to the vendor since that time.
Just for Dr. Gavin's, so you'll know what we're talking about, we received a $500,000 grant from USDE for immersive technology specific to the schools. So the authorizer is not benefiting technically from that. Every bit of the money and the equipment or the resources went to the schools. So each one of our schools received the headsets for virtual learning. They got the carts to keep them in, all the batteries for recharging, and warranties for up to 3 years, and training for their staff. So that's what that grant is.
Their
Mhm.
finance.
Uh-huh.
Only other thing that's in my report is that we're still working with the State Personnel Board on the salary progression.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
I don't believe we do. So at this point, we'll open up the agenda for public comment time. So the first thing listed in a new business approval, call for quality schools.
Just getting to my agenda. Back over here to go back to. Mhm. Sure.
Kind of update
Sure.
everybody as to where we are and how we got here.
Yep, absolutely. So a little reminder for the board, for new board members, and actually for everybody, just to tee it up before we get to the actual conversation and or vote on these. The Call for Quality Schools application cycle actually began early back in 2024 when we released an RFP for a vendor, to select a vendor for that, to do the third-party evaluations of the applications. So we received 6 proposals, and then following the individual review by staff and then collective review by staff, we selected and then presented to the application committee 3 of those vendors and their proposals to review for selection and then recommendation to the full board. And so Ms. Scoggins and Ms. Robbins were both on that committee. And then on March the 6th, the 2 of you all met as a committee, selected the Learning Collective for that work. And then the full board approved it the following month when you guys made the recommendation. I don't remember who made the recommendation. The one thing I would flag is that we only received 6 applications. And that is simply because there are not a lot of school districts rated a D or an F, as you know, and our schools can only operate in a district that is rated D or F unless they have approval by the local board. There were 2 applicants that ended up being ineligible. One was because they were a private school seeking to convert to a public charter, which is against the current statute. And then one was in a C district, and that would have required local school board approval for them to continue through the cycle. So we ended up with 3 going through, 1 that didn't make it to stage 2, and the 2 that'll be before you today that made it all the way to stage 3, passed the capacity interview. The only other thing I would flag for you that was new to this cycle was applicants were provided an additional touch point for the first time. So they got initial feedback from the third-party reviewers, and then they were able to respond, and then the reviewers did another deep dive into the application from the 2 different applicant teams. So those are the things, just kind of give you a big overview, high-level overview of how the process started. It's long. Takes about 9 months to get through the application cycle because of the different phases and the level of review on each one of those things. We have with us today on the phone one of the 3 that were a part of the evaluation team, and Wanda is on the phone. Wanda, I don't want to mess up your last name. It's kind of like mine, so I'm just going to go with Wanda if that's okay.
That's fine.
Okay, all right, very good. Wanda's from New Orleans and couldn't make the trip today, but she's at least here in the event some of you have questions or need clarification on something. I've sent you, I think, everything that you need to know about the applicants. You've seen their third-party or 3-page response, post-capacity interview. You have copies of the applications. You have copies of the initial reviews, the final reviews, and the recommendations, and everything's in your board packet for consideration. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you unless somebody has a question.
Process question?
You may.
So, the third party,
Yes, that's the one, the Learning Collective
okay.
is the one, that is the one that Ms. Robbins and Ms. Scoggins met back in March and selected from the proposals that we received. And that's who, yes,
With that company.
that's correct.
Okay.
And she was one of the reviewers there were 3 that were on that team. And so Wanda is with them. Yep.
Are any of those 3 that were on that team connected in this? Anyway?
There is one connection of one of the reviewers. Wanda, is it you or the other person that was connected to Mississippi? Had family or had been here and worked at one point in time? It's not Adam.
I have, you know what, Dr. Clay worked with a concern that in action, and they did something. But no one has ever worked directly for the state of district.
So I think what she's saying is that somebody has been working in Mississippi and that's the connection. Is that what you said? I think Jordan is going to give you a call just to clarify that. It's really hard to hear on this teleconference line.
Okay.
So just hang tight for a call. Okay, so we'll know then to answer your question. Mhm. What? Okay, the question, Wanda, was who on the team from the Learning Collective has done work or lived in Mississippi for the Mississippi Connection?
No one has lived in Mississippi. Dr. Goins works with a consulting firm
Okay,
that provided some professional development in Mississippi.
That's
I
what-
believe in
oh,
I've worked with a firm many years ago
Uh-huh.
also that provided some professional development as an external consultant.
okay. Thank you for that clarification. I'm going to pass the phone back to Jordan. Again, high tech. Yeah, I guess we'll just leave it here in case there's some other questions that pop up. The one thing I would flag for you guys, since you haven't been here, about 3 years ago, we started putting in the RFP that anybody who made an application or proposal, submitted one, would have to have some level of connection to Mississippi. So that is actually in the RFP, that they've either done work here before or they would be willing to contact with somebody here who's familiar with our context and landscape. So that's something that's been spelled out in the RFP. I think it was about 3 years ago we added that in. So,
Are there any other? On to consider, I'm probably going to need some direction on this, Amy. Consider approval of the Call for Quality Schools for Archway Charter School. That's the first business, and I guess I will entertain the motion. Or do we need to have discussion?
then the second, and then,
I will entertain a motion to accept the recommendation for Archway Charter School.
I have are we entertaining, you're saying a motion either way to approve or not approve?
it's for the recommendation
for the
of
recommendation.
the third-party evaluator. And then, and then, second.
Yes.
Okay, I move recommendation of the third party evaluation.
For a second?
Second, Jennifer Whittier.
Thank you. So at this point, is there any discussion about the recommendation of the third-party evaluator for Archway?
Yes, I have a discussion. So basically, I know the recommendation or suggestion is to not approve. So I guess the question, their timeline is to open up in 2025 in the fall. So based on the recommendations, do you feel like there's enough timeline and enough runway for a school to be able to that have been not met to be at met or at least approaching met around by the time fall happens? Because I'm assuming it's based off of what they have right now, correct?
Are you asking
Wanda.
Yeah, so it's kind of, I'm sorry, I was,
asking,
so I'm asking Wanda, but I'm also asking you guys as well. If anybody, to answer that question.
not approved, then they would.
That's correct.
And it's based off of, from our framework, where they are now. And their projection to open is next year in the fall. I'm just making sure my timeline is correct.
It's based on the application, not the framework. So it's based on the application for the new schools. And then the timeline that they can present is either when they make application, they can propose to open the following year, or they can delay, or they can recommend that they want to, open in 2026 or 2027. They can make application that year. Now, y'all remember, 2 board meetings ago, or maybe 3 now, we, the board approved 2 timelines for the RFP for this year, for the new school application cycle. So one will release in January of '25, and then another will release in July of '25, so that we could have that extended runway for applicants who maybe were in the cycle and needed a further runway. And then they'll kind of meet in the middle at some point, and we'll end up with just one that was longer. So
Yeah. What is this when it says year?
the year that they
That's all.
propose to open,
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm just making sure.
that's right.
Okay.
That's correct.
Like the school year, so like in the fall of next year.
That's right. That's right.
And so I guess maybe this question is to, well, go ahead. I wanted to make sure let's see.
No, you're right. That,
Yeah, let me see. Yeah, making sure if.
I just have a question. So I read the whole packet. 5 areas that were to be graded. 20 met or partially met the standard. 5 did not meet the standard. It seems to be a hard recommendation of do not approve. I guess I'm trying to get a sense of like the reason why the recommendation is. It seems to me, and I may be wrong, but kind of condensing everything that I've read, this is the hybrid model, which is a concept to the charter sector in
That's
Mississippi.
right.
Is that right?
it would be.
Yeah.
That's correct.
And so it seemed to me that like that's the driving force behind certainty or lack of clarity about how that would operate in that fair. Is that my understanding? Is there some other reason why the recommendation is do not approve?
Yeah, I do not believe it. I'm not going to speak for Wanda or the evaluator. So I'm going to let Wanda answer that question on behalf of them, and then I can share with you my thoughts if you'd like. Wanda, could you hear the question?
Yes, I did. And I noticed he said there were 25, he counted 25 sections. Are you looking at the report where you counted those sections?
Yes, I'm looking at the first couple of pages. There were a few that were not applicable, so I didn't count those. I was just counting the applicable ones.
Yeah.
Out of the 25 sections, there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sections that does not meet the standard.
Right.
There were sections that partially met and a few sections that met the standard. Overall, the recommendation was made because of several inconsistencies throughout the application with scheduling. In addition to that, there was some question about the impact that the proposed model would have on student achievement. In addition to that, there was a lack of clarity around students that would be targeted to attend the school. And there were clear questions just around the proposal or the proposed group ability to open and operate this school. Some of the main issues are highlighted in the review summary. When we asked about assessments, there was no clear plan to administer assessments. One, we noted during the state assessment period, there were some inconsistencies around transportation. The school proposed to provide transportation to all students in the catchment area. And then later on in the application, the school proposed to only provide transportation for students within a mile of the school. In terms of financial capacity, the school indicated they had already applied for CSP funds. CSP funds are typically applied for once a school has been approved, not prior to. There seems to have been an understanding around the approval process for CSP funding. The budget did not appear to be financially sound to open and operate this school and this model. In addition to that, as I said earlier, the academic portion had glaring inconsistencies in that the students would attend a 4-week cycle. They would have 3 weeks of online, 1 week of offline, but 1 week does not necessarily mean a full week. It only meant Thursday and Friday of the fully online week. Fridays in this particular school were considered professional development days, but Friday was also considered assessment days. Thursdays were considered to be days in which 85 minutes of instruction for core academic subjects would be taught, appeared to be culture days. So throughout the application, there were major inconsistencies. One major concern as well was whether or not these families would have access to internet and would be able to access the courses online. And that question still was not answered. It's still unknown whether or not that would happen. However, to their credit, they ended up saying in the capacity interview that they could perhaps provide some catchment areas where are hubs for students or families to have access points. Unfortunately, that is still unknown how or if that could happen, or if they would have the capacity to provide those types of hubs, or how they would even get students or families to the hub.
Thank you, Ms. Wanda.
Yes, sure thing.
Other,
Could I ask a follow-up question, Ms. Wanda? So, have you seen this hybrid model be successful in other jurisdictions?
Based on my experience, and I'm not speaking for TLC, I've been consulting in schools and districts for a very long time and working with charter schools. I have seen a hybrid model that worked, but not in a rural area, and that is the difference. Hybrid models may work in urban or highly, I would say, urbanized areas, but in rural areas, it's quite difficult to not have more face-to-face instruction with students and rely on a hybrid model where there's a high poverty rate of families that may not even have access to equipment or resources to be successful.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So I guess what I'm gonna say is, I guess, toward the board, but basically, you know, at this point, I feel like we have only 2 schools at this phase right now, and so I feel like there's enough time to address some of the concerns that, you know, that are on the findings. And so also knowing that at the end of the day, we do have the authority to halt something if we felt like if, you know, May came around and it was like, man, there's still some things that needed to be taken care of. I'm just kind of like, there's enough time to, this is something new, something that hasn't been done. And I'm just kind of big about giving people an opportunity to at least try and see. And I'm not saying on the backs of, you know, families that are entrusting people, you know, with this institution that will, you know, provide this their education to their children. But also, you know, I just kind of would like to think that we are moving toward just kind of other opportunities and being more friendly to other operators that are wanting to come along and start new schools for, that need them.
So I think my concern, as I read through the information, Madam Chair,
Oh, yes, ma'am,
Okay.
absolutely.
Uh,
Sorry.
I think it was pointed out that there were about 20 standards that were rated, but the 5 that does not meet the standard. 4 of those standards, in my opinion, are very pertinent to establishing a school, like the curriculum and the instructional design. The comments behind that particular standard, when it says does not meet, lacks sufficient detail on how this approach to curriculum and instruction meets the needs of the students of the region. The curriculum that's very crucial to establishing a school. And then you look at the special population and at-risk students, they don't meet the standard there. And there was a big percentage of, I think it said 15% are SPED students and English learners. So how they don't meet that. So how will those students be served? And one of the other ones that concerned me was the governing board does not meet the standard. So which means that the overseer, we don't meet the standard there. So not gonna have good board oversight. And then the staffing plans to hiring, how you gonna hire teachers and administrators does not meet the standards. So the ones, in my opinion, that do not meet the standard, those are very crucial to the successful operation of a school district. And if we're basing our decision on the application, then the application is not sufficient. I don't know what they could improve on. That's to be determined, but we're making the decision based on the application that was submitted.
Are there other questions or concerns from board members' comments?
Do we have a chance to correct these 5 items?
My understanding, and y'all please jump in, that the schools received the response. They had a chance to respond, which they did. And then this final recommendation was made after the responses from the schools were submitted and were taken into consideration. So,
I'd love to hear from them personally, just the newest member on the board. I don't even know much. Y'all have forgotten more than I know, but, just looking at the mission statement here, the mission of the Mississippi Charter School, authorized boards, authorize high-quality charter schools, and then particularly schools designed to expand opportunities for undeserved students. I think, having friends in that area, we have to think outside the box. First met with you, it's about the kids. And I've got 2 daughters and 1 daughter-in-law that are doing a hybrid model now, and they wouldn't be able to complete their graduate degrees or undergraduate degrees if it wasn't for a hybrid model. I just think as a board, we ought to think outside the box. So how can we figure out, how can we make this work for students in this area to give them an advantage? And that's just an outside opinion looking in, and I'm the newest member on the board. I think we have to think along those lines. How can we work with the partners just submitting an application to help these kids in this area? And I hate to say no to that.
I was just going to, if I might, just, you said something about listening or hearing from the applicant team. I hope all of you got a chance to listen to the capacity interviews, because those were significantly long. I know they're over 90 minutes, but hopefully you were able to hear the probing questions and then the responses and glean some information from those. I mean, that's just a part of, obviously, the whole entire application cycle, but hopefully you guys were able to take some time and listen to those and hear directly from the applicant and the questions. And Wanda was a part of that dialogue and discourse that was in here. Hopefully you had a chance.
Back to Ben's question, I mean, they got 20 out of 25. Well, they have to be a perfect score to be approved, or?
I believe they had to, I think once they hit 5, is that correct?
This is, it can be hard, I guess, a little tricky to confuse with the capacity interview. You have to have 75% to get invited to the capacity interview. And that's, so that could be what you're thinking about. And of course, the financials can't be a do not meet to get to the capacity interview. But to your point, again, we did build in an additional touch point this year, which was the first time. So in addition to the 3-page response during stage 2, there was feedback from the evaluators, and then another opportunity for them to provide input or responses to that, and then a deeper dive into the application. So those are, a couple of different things that we've changed over time based on input from board members and stakeholders. So Wanda, is there anything else that you need to add to, or I can?
And I just want to respond to the newest board member that talked about opportunities in hybrid models. Hybrid models can work. However, there must be a plan to get to having the capacity to open and operate. Yes, as a team, we did agree that Mississippi and these rural areas need to have additional options and some innovation to add value to our children's education. But it is significantly important to look at those critical areas that are not fully developed within the application. And when we talk about curriculum and instruction, we talk about educational outcomes for students. What programs are you using? What is the curriculum? How will this be taught? While this applicant does throw in a compendium of programs it's going to use, there is no plan on how these programs will even work simultaneously. And when we look at how the applicant wants to hire high quality teachers, during the capacity interview, there was some trouble understanding what was meant by high quality. However, in the application, there was a note or another section that indicated, but if we can't find these teachers, high quality teachers, we will make some adjustments to what the criteria may or may not be. I think it's important to also look at board member capacity. If we don't have a governing board that can provide effective oversight to the, then we may not get the results we desire. And so I just wanted to add that there were significant gaps in the application that would substantially or lend itself to the viability of the applicant's group capacity to open and operate. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I saw in the actual interview, and they may have addressed this, and I missed it in some of the responses. The ability of the children, high-speed internet access. Great concept, but when asked about it, they were saying they were looking for some grant to provide hotspot access for these students. And then if that didn't work, they were working with trying to find some partners, be it a library or a church or you know, a place where the children could come and meet and be able to do their online work, but, and maybe they addressed that and I missed it. And Wanda, if I missed it, please clarify where they, if they expanded on that some. But it concerns me that if you're gonna have a school that 3 weeks out of the month is virtual, what if you don't have high quality broadband service at your home? That, I mean, that effectiveness of the school.
And one of the, government is certainly,
Sure. I think that is the plan, but I also know that is a 2 to 3 year. Where they get to all rural parts of Mississippi, it's not available in August for every county in the state. As I wish it were, but it won't. It just concerns me that you enroll students who can't actually access the work. Was that addressed at all down the line?
I believe during the capacity interview, we had that discussion. If you were to look back at the budget, you would see there was no funds even budgeted for that process. So when asked about the creation of hotspots or how students would access courses, online courses, the idea of hubs came up, but the budget does not even support the idea.
Thank you.
Wanda,
You're welcome.
this is Ben Morgan. Another question. I read, and I think it was this, some of the responsive information after this that Archway provided. There was some discussion about their governing structure, the board, some of these logistical issues. Did you get a chance to view all that, and did that help ease some of your concerns?
Yes, so in triangulating the budget with the organizational plan and the academic plan, certainly the budget is a concern because the budget did not provide adequate startup funds. It's the reliance on P funds, but the lack of understanding of how CSP funds are granted. We know that CSP funds when they're applied for through Mississippi First. However, the lack of startup funds, the inability to understand the process lends itself to a lot of uncertainty. As we discussed some plausible ways to address online access, there's not enough information or there's not enough financial support to make it happen, let alone understanding the needs of the infrastructure. If you look back in this application, another concern is the location. They've identified a church as the location. I believe in that application it says classrooms, and my numbers may be a little off. I don't have the application in front of me, that section. They will need 8 classrooms. The church community center only has 5 classrooms. They also indicated that there was a plan and conversation about retrofitting and maybe changing a boardroom or community room into classrooms and the growth of the school to add more students. But it's unclear to the evaluators who owns the property, who's going to pay for it, who's going to provide any of the construction work. There's no estimates or anything in terms of long-term planning over the proposed 5 years, just 5 years.
Start a new business, I kind of understand that to some degree, but Wanda, let me ask you this. I'm looking at the response from the post-capacity interview from Archway. They talk about a board and multiple board members, a board president. So what do you know about the board? I mean, I'm seeing that it doesn't meet the standard, but what I'm reading from Archway seems to imply that they have a board and that they're operating.
This is Dr. Herndon. Dr. Herndon has experienced, Mr. Green was a part of the capacity interview, and I'm going through my notes. Sorry if I'm pausing. I'm just going through our notes. I believe one of the major concerns was a lack of financial experience, or legal experience.
Well, I guess where I'm going before we get into that is the recommendation seems to imply that they don't have a governing board, but then they're saying they do have a governing board. So
Oh, yes, that's because they've decided they're only going to have 3 board members. It's impossible to have a quorum with only 3 board members. And I believe they should have a minimum of 5 board members. The bylaws were unsigned, which we questioned, and I believe they said they didn't have a copy of the bylaws. Trying to see what they said about the versus having board members, how they would be.
what's according to their statement, they have 4 board members.
And they said they would recruit them. Those were the major gaps at the present time. They did not. Trying to grow this, but having a facility plan or proposing has, but it's not.
Thank you, Ms. Wanda, for all that information. I guess if I were to summarize some of what we talked about, roll it all out. Is there time, to Candace's point, in December to allow Archway to address us these 5 areas, like Gavin pointed out, that they had. The reason I say that is I read the response from Archway, and I read it that they had, or at least attempting to meet. It's not as black and white as they don't meet, I guess. So if we gave them a touch of time to address those specific areas, directly to us, so we can hear from them, to Jay's point. Would we run afoul of any timeline situation, process? Because that's something I don't know.
That's what I was just gonna ask. Know when that actually, I don't,
Does my question
without
make
looking
sense,
at,
though?
yes, and
Yeah, okay.
I don't know without digging back into the statute if that is or could be. Thank you.
I have a statement.
Okay.
Is this an appropriate time to make it?
Yes, ma'am.
I hear concerns, but they're not just concerns, they're major concerns. And as an educator, those are red flags to me. And I'm all for trying new things, with our schools, but I don't want to sacrifice the education and the availability and all of these things that have been brought up, just because we want to try something new. The rural area in the Delta is going to be very difficult to provide internet access for these children. I would hate to think that they're going to have to sit in the parking lot of McDonald's and find a hotspot and try to do 3 weeks of work. The very idea of assuming that you can get high quality teachers from other districts to come into a situation that is seems questionable gives me great pause. I want to see us get new schools, but I don't want us to see us sacrifice quality for these students. They deserve more.
And I guess I want to say to what Jay was mentioning, if there was a time and opportunity to meet with the potential operators of just kind of some of the concerns that you have and Marcy and Dr. Gavin, where there's some more questions, even questions I may have, or Jay or Ben, and we can just kind of ask those questions. And if those are, if you know, finish having those questions that we have, getting them answered, if we feel like we want to move forward or not. I mean, it's just kind of, these suggestions from the evaluators, the recommendations, they're just what they are. But we are still, I feel like within our duty is to kind of contextualize and be able to kind of bring everything together other than just reading a report and watching the interview. That's very formal and it's not a lot of, we just kind of don't have a lot of input or thoughts or, around people. I don't know, it's just hard making it a high stakes decision about things like this and not giving a full picture of what you're trying to do, and then be able to answer some concerns in real time.
To envision how it's managed. How to there are the ability and
And so, Wanda, I do want to make mention that I don't think, and I don't want to speak for Jay and Ben, that there are, that I'm approaching the conversation as a person that doesn't have concern. Everything that everybody mentioned is a concern. And I guess it's kind of one of those things, we have concerns and just allowing the opportunity for Archway Charter School to respond and give some information if the time is available. And if it's not, then we'll kind of have to make other, you know, adjustments. But for the most part, I think it's just a matter of giving them another opportunity to respond to. These are questions that came after the interview. So it's kind of like, okay, well, what's the plan? Before I just say absolutely not, giving them an opportunity, a final opportunity.
I would just like to add a couple of comments that just for what it's worth. But one of the things at NACSA that we talked about over and over and over again, and I know the folks that were at NACSA with me can confirm that we heard this a lot, and that is authorizers being willing to take a calculated risk. The calculated risk, though, has to have some level of substance to it, has to have some level of confidence that the board can take what was in the application, what the reviewers have said, and say, we are, fairly confident, whatever that level of confidence is, that we can take this calculated risk, knowing that whatever you do is going to impact children. And so that we heard that often throughout the conference about, innovation is important, and it is important to the charter community at large, meaning across the nation. But to the points also that have been made, there are valid concerns and questions, and those are the things that a board would have to determine at what gives you enough level of confidence in your own decision making that this is a calculated risk worth taking for children. So that's just, I don't know if y'all want to add anything that you heard.
I agree, Dr. K. And so what I'm just continuing to ask is just a follow-up. But I agree, making calculated risk. Quality schools decisions would be made.
Admin, yes, admin rules.
And so going back to the access concern, that is definitely a concern that's very valid in my opinion, and is outside of what they can necessarily control, meaning the new school. So with this model being heavily dependent on having access and knowing that the students that were in Humphreys County, the other public school district, they have always been challenged with access. And while those schools were in the virtual setting, Humphrey School District for consecutive years was an F. But once those students returned to the classrooms, now we see those students have now moved. The district has moved to a C level, but access is a real issue, and I'm just very hesitant approving something that is going to be outside the control of the operator and knowing that there is an access issue, that's not disputable. There is an access issue. And so what students do when they don't have access, they do nothing. And going to a McDonald's inside of a gas station, that's not a viable option.
Just for context for new board members and that folks that don't know you and don't know what you do, then if you can give some, just a little background so they'll know where that information comes to you from.
Oh,
So it'll be
I-
helpful for them, I think, so they'll know where that comes from.
I serve at the Mississippi Department of Education as the Chief of Operations, so school finance and school operations for school districts across the state fall within my purview.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but there have been multiple surveys that went out to school districts on access to technology or lack thereof.
Yes.
And would it be fair to say that's where some of the information comes from?
That is correct, yeah. We just, students in high poverty or areas that lack high technology, streaming access, those students don't fare well. And we've seen that across the board when students return to face-to-face learning. Because of the lack of access, they perform better. And I just don't want us to be a disservice to these students. And we know that there is an access issue in that particular district.
Couple thoughts, if we have to make a decision today. Or no. Response that they sent, or we got back the email this morning, I guess.
So their three-page response, you got it on the 15th of October
Right, it was
and on the
recent.
14th, and then I sent you another
But
copy.
Within the last couple of weeks, we got it. And so, you know, when I read that, and I felt like they addressed a lot of the things. Now, was it addressed perfectly? No, but they made an effort to address the 5 areas in particular that don't meet the standard. I also just think about it from a business standpoint, and it's like starting a new business, it's very hard to answer everything. So, you know, on the whole, you know, if we were to approve it today, you know, there's still a lot of things they've got to figure out. And they wind up that they figure those things out and open next year. Maybe that they can't figure those things out and they want not opening next year. So I think the decision today is not, it's a step to approve this application, not to guarantee a school opens next year, but to guarantee them a chance to continue this process at the outset of what's frankly a new business venture. Is the way I look at it, if that makes sense.
Let me say one other thing, if I might, just for context and reference for everybody, so we remember, there will be another application cycle that opens in January. So we will release a few months from now, another opportunity for applicants. Now, the tricky part there is going to be which school districts, because, you know, we've gone from 42 districts or 43 that were DNF in 2019 down to, I think, 5 this year.
Right.
So that would be the tricky part for increasing number of applicants or moving to
So
that.
The practical
process.
reality is if we deny this application, Dave Humphreys County.
Is that correct,
If they're a city,
Dr. Gavin, if they are C this year?
they're closed off. They don't get this chance again.
I agree, yeah.
But is this the first?
I think coming from the faith-based world and coming from the secular world, as you said, Dr. K, calculated risk. And if they don't get their ducks in a row, they can't open. But if they do, you know, I'd love to, you know, outside first time really board meeting participate, I'd love to give them a chance to try to figure it out and us, you know, hold them accountable, you know. certainly be my thoughts.
I have a question just from a point of clarity. So if we approve today, that means they can go forward and open with their deficiencies. They can hire incompetent teachers. They cannot have adequate classrooms. They're good to go.
There's
The
no
board has,
accountability.
the board has
Once
the
you approve
authority.
Yeah, we can add contingencies, like we have the authority to do a lot and add things if we need. So it's kind of like we're not planning on, like you said, those concerns that you got, those are real concerns. So it's like, of course, we would want to hear more of a better plan than that. And so it just allows us a little bit more, allows them and us even to like, hey, this is, I think to what Ben said of like, hey, is this something that can be opened in January? Not in January, I'm sorry, in the fall of 2025. And if not, we have the authority, we are the board, we can make it, if it's something to where it's not suffice and all the things aren't in
Do
place.
we have, I don't know the answer. Do we have the ability to make them delay a year? Or do we have the
Once we
ability?
approve this,
Right, I don't know the answer to that. Or
I
do
don't
we,
think so.
or do we only have the ability to say, we approve this based on the following conditions? That we think those conditions should be.
Have a couple of options. So you have conditions that you can apply to, should you decide to approve, and the board can determine those conditions ahead of time. There are also required pre-opening conditions that are built into our conditional opening. The one thing that is not an approved requirement is enrollment. And there has not been yet board decision or a board determination on what that threshold needs to be in order for a school to be viable financially going forward in the next year. So that would be one thing if the board decides that they want to go forward and approve this school with conditions, then I would think that enrollment would be one thing you would want to consider, considering the other challenges that we've had with schools in the past. So, but there is a calendar of support and requirements that a school in pre-opening has to go through in order to be, eligible. They can delay. They can request a delay. We've had schools to do that in the past, and delay their opening. We've had where we've encouraged a school to delay their opening and they did not. So we've had a variety of different from different schools. So yes, to answer your question, yes, there are things that can be done on the front end to accommodate some of the concerns.
what are the repercussions if they don't? If we approve it and they don't, are they still allowed to go forth and open?
It's such as,
Like I know on one of our applications coming up, we have conditions. So if they don't meet the conditions that we put in place, what happens? Are they still allowed? What authority do we have to tell them that they cannot open?
I think we have ultimate authority to say, if you don't meet these conditions, then you cannot open. But I don't want to speak for the board or for the statute without referring back to one of the attorneys in the room here. So, but that's my thought on that.
We would consider those pre-opening.
We'll build those into the contract. In times past, they haven't been built into the contract. If the board considers we would like to go ahead and do that, then the contract, to Amy's point, would have more, I think, authority, for lack of a better term, than it would if it were just written in one of our rules.
And so I guess,
So-
not to get super technical, but we can enter into a contract and have contractual obligations back and forth. So, yeah, it doesn't just, we don't vote today and they open up a school
Right.
next August. They still have benchmarks along the way. As I understand it, I think it's cool.
That way for the second thing we're discussing today, right?
Those are conditions recommended around an ESP provider, and there are some conditions on that one that I think the board needs to consider not doing. I don't think that we have authority. Those are recommendations that came from the,
But conceptually, you're right.
Yes.
Conceptually, you're correct. We get to have a contract and have conditions on how, once they open, there are conditions on operation, the accountability standard.
y'all finish it.
We were losing a board member, I wanted to hang on. As a reminder, the motion on the table is not to approve. Archway moving forward, because that was what came to us, from the independent evaluation. Are we ready to vote on that as a board? Are there other discussions, questions, concerns?
Call for the question.
So a yes vote would be to not recommend it.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Have a motion on the table and we have a discussion. We have a second, sorry. We have had a discussion, yes. We have a motion and a second. So I'll call for the vote at this point. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay.
Wait a minute. All those in favor of not approving?
Yes, ma'am.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Okay.
Ms. McKernan, are you there?
I vote nay.
The nays have it. I'll vote no as well. So the nays have it. At this point, anyone have another motion for the board to consider at this time?
I'll make a motion to.
Second, Candace Robbins.
So is there any discussion of this motion? Now, did y'all get to hear us on the phone?
Yes.
No, what was the motion?
The motion was made to approve the charter contract, and it was seconded. So now we have the floor open for questions or comments or concerns.
The charter contract for Mississippi Global or the hybrid? Hybrid's been decided, correct?
No, ma'am. The hybrid, we're still on the Archway charter because Mr. Morgan made is that correct, Dylan? Okay, the application, okay.
Approve the contract.
You're right.
So the motion would be to approve the application for Archway Charter School, and Ms. Robbins seconded that motion. So are there any questions or is there any discussion?
So we're all on the same page into the point of the application, which would then, after this vote, negotiate a contract which would have conditions, normal conditions or whatever.
This will be, just to clarify, that'll be the standard contract that we normally issue as a charter. with those other additional. And what would this, the timeline need to take place then by the 20th for the contract? Are we good on that? Just approval, okay, okay.
We would need then to vote on whether or not to approve and then discuss any additional requirements that the school would need. So that we need to discuss. I would only vote for the school to proceed if they fully address the connectivity and the ability of students to have access to their curriculum.
Can I ask a question then, because we'll have to be the ones working through this. So for clarification then, what would that mean? So what type of evidence would the board like to see along with these conditions? Because we'll have to be the ones monitoring and making sure that they meet the terms and conditions. So I think as you determine which conditions you'd like to see, something for us to have to go with, I mean, to just say, to provide evidence that that has been met, is what I'm trying to say.
They would have to, in my opinion, would be that their budget for them to provide any access to high-speed internet where it is available or hotspots where it is not. I don't know exactly what that looks like for them, or transportation to a place where they would have that.
Provider that could possibly serve Wi-Fi or something like that, or
Like a threshold,
Oh, the one,
maybe I'm wrong.
I don't object to that. I don't personally, but I don't know that you could say, Xfinity provides or a provider provides, because in that area of the state, there just is not a service provider.
Right.
And even like a Starlink or something like that is not, and I don't know what the federal standard is, but there's a federal standard for how much you can upload and download. And I would think that they would have to meet the minimum.
their research to be able to find a provider and be able to.
I hate to point out the obvious, but at some point, even if they had a library or a church, kind of defeats the purpose of having the online, we're gonna have this new model that everybody's gonna be able to do it online if they have to all be in one spot. I mean, that's counterproductive.
So are we not saying that all students should have access to broadband access from their home? Otherwise, how are they gonna do the work?
That's what I was assuming, that
Broadband.
some kind of, I know people work from home and sometimes they have these hotspot things for some of those areas that don't often. But I don't know, that's not my field of expertise. So that's why I said it's to their expert, they have to do their own research and figuring out like, this is what, because it may not be an option after they do further research. And it's like, hey, we can't even find a network provider. So.
I think it's just as simple as broadband access at their home.
How would we would have to know the, name of the student, the locate, I mean, how will we know?
Pretty crucial to know. As part of, I don't know if that'll be part of their application that my home has
Yep.
access to
True.
broadband,
Yeah.
internet.
Yep.
I just jotted down
Oh.
areas. I didn't jot down. I thought
Okay.
Dylan was taking good notes down
Oh,
there.
well, then, okay.
And
Thank
then,
you.
so I jotted down transportation. I didn't put anything else there. The budget,
Okay.
internet connectivity, enrollment, application enrollment, and that my home has access. That's all I had on there. When the children enroll.
Now, I know you mentioned curriculum structure. Is that something that's already in the current, the thing that you mentioned? Or is it something that we would need to add in there? Like, I guess, because I'm assuming, yeah,
There are references to curriculum in the application. I think, not to put words in Wanda's mouth or anything, I think some of the concerns were the application of the curriculum, that how it'll be delivered and maybe monitored for assessment. And then the other piece being, when the students are taking state assessments, where will they go
Got it.
to take
Okay.
those? And Wanda, please correct me if I'm wrong.
no,
Okay, thank you.
Also address the governing board piece of this.
they need, I guess, she mentioned 5 and there's 4 currently.
I think one is a non-voting member. If I read that response correctly, that would be 3 with 1 non-voting, if I read it correctly and recall correctly.
So they need an additional.
They're gonna have a 5-member board.
Yeah.
One is, they have 4 right now, one's non-voting, then they need. Isn't that right?
That's in the bylaws we need to require.
I haven't read their bylaws, so I'd have to go back and read them. Read the application, but not the bylaws. Wanda, did you reference the bylaws that they mentioned 5?
Members listed in attachment 13.
Okay, I can pull up attachment 13 pretty quickly.
2 of the board members
Right.
questions from
Did you just say that 2 of the board members are out of state?
Yes, ma'am.
2 of the board members reside out of state.
Are out of state? Okay.
Do operators who may have board members that are not in state?
We have in the past. I don't know that that will be the norm going forward. I don't want to speak out of turn, but we have had some in the past, yes. Attachment 13, right?
there other questions or concerns that should?
The bylaws are here, so. Thank you. The board shall have up to 7 members, but not fewer than 3. The number of board members may be increased beyond 7 by the affirmative vote of 2/3 majority of the then serving board of directors. A board member need not be a resident of the state of Mississippi, and that is in their bylaws. As far as the
So they're currently compliant with that.
number,
Could we approve, subject to the conditions, or maybe we could, we further define it at a special call meeting in a week or two instead of doing it on the fly?
If we,
So you're accepting their application, if I get this correct. Contract. Well, I mean, are we gonna have to say that the contingencies are set here?
Call meeting, determine, then enter into a contract.
Handle it before then, that way they have.
Just a thought, just a thought.
that kind of- yeah.
Yeah.
Item 1, we got
Yeah.
3 more to go.
He said basically.
or just amend it as we.
I motion to. Vote on this amended motion, and then you'll. Second, Candace Robbins. Oh, okay, yeah, okay, I'm sorry.
Those words. So we'll amend the motion to approve the application subject to.
So we have the motion. Do we have a second? At this point, I'll. No, go ahead.
no, I was just asking her a question about that. I'm sorry.
No, I want y'all. Y'all hear that? The members that are joining us online, the current amendment on the table would be to approve the application subject to additional conditions that will be determined at a later special called meeting. That is the motion that is on the table. Amendment that is on the table. All those in favor? All those opposed?
Nay.
Ayes have it. So at this point, the motion has been amended. And we will vote on the original motion as amended. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed?
Nay.
No.
Sandra, are you still there?
No. And I said no.
So identify themselves whenever.
Have it in that case. The second agenda. I did. Now ready to move to the second new business item.
On what that one did, but what I was looking, but
So we will now move to new business item B. The action is to consider approval of the Call for Quality Schools final findings for Mississippi Global Academy. I will entertain a motion to accept the recommendation for Mississippi. Is there a motion?
So moved, Jennifer.
Thank you. Is there a second? Sandra, did you second that?
I'm sorry, I had to step away a few minutes ago. Yes.
I think those are probably.
Is there any discussion?
Yeah, I just have some questions. If Wanda's still on the phone about some of the conditions, can you flesh that out a little bit for me?
On, looking at no ESP board. It's also on the that's on the ESP. And
Is that the only condition?
only, there are 5.
Okay.
Any other questions and concerns?
Could we hear those conditions?
Yeah,
Yes, ma'am. I can read those to you.
and then we have one question about one of the conditions.
The 5 conditions are, number 1, no ESP board member serves as a board member of the Mississippi Global Academy Board. That there is,
Mhm.
number 2 is that there is a signed agreement between the ESG and MGA, which states that MGA may terminate the agreement with the ESP at any time without requiring the ESP to agree with MGA's decision to terminate. Number 3 is that the duration of the service agreement between the ESG and MGA is limited to 1 year with annual renewal and renegotiation options. That the signed service agreement between the ESP and MGA clearly states that a maximum of 9% of MGA revenue would be allocated to the ESP. And number 5, that the yearly evaluation of the ESP's program and services are conducted by a third party other than ESP or MGA.
Thank you.
Wanda, We had,
I'll provide some clarity for you.
thank you.
There's a signed agreement between the ESP and States MGA and attorney. And the proposed applicant, MGA, provided a contract with the ESP that does not terminate. Operate year after year, year after year without terminating unless they terminate themselves. Not have or be able to terminate on their own. They can't make that decision. Only MGA, the ESP. Remember, the ESP founder and board member is also contract itself offers benefits. Option itself. It wants to continue the service. It states that maximum of 9% of MGA's revenue. P, 9% of the revenue. Section in the budget. Provide based on MGA, SP, MGA. Down. 9% of the school's revenue in terms of serving impoverished areas. I agree between the ESP, that's the maximum. It doesn't say whether or not they're going to increase that. Not have the autonomy. Contract. It's the ESP. And the conflict arises with to have them evaluated. Full control of the contract. Of the school's application. And professional development. There's evidence of providing practices. These people are providing services and professional development. They're not the leader.
Do you have anything?
Long as y'all are clarifying these things.
Right.
Um,
Otherwise, we're in the same exact
exact
situation as we have been before, that
Let's
we've
not do
been
that.
trying
Please get the
to.
conditions in there.
Yeah, let's get this correct
Please.
on the front end, or we're gonna have a situation where the operator
And authorize her
and
to
the
execute.
runs the school, not the governing board that runs the school. And the governing board has got to have authority to terminate the vendor that it contracts with. And the ESP or the CMO, or whatever you're gonna call them, Charter Management Organization, Dr. Gavin, for your knowledge there, or the ESP, the Educational Service Provider, has to be a vendor school relationship where they can terminate that. So. Go ahead, Wanda.
The only relationship it had. The founder.
So I think you said that the,
Right. Washington Global being,
Is she in Mississippi or is she
Yeah.
in Washington?
she's in Washington, and she lives in Washington, as far as I know.
For clarity, I think the ESP is Global Public Charter Foundation, right?
Correct.
It operates a Washington academy. Also operates a Mississippi,
Oh, okay.
right?
we're not talking Washington County, because this is a Baldwin.
This
We're
is
talking
Mississippi.
No, we're
Washington,
talking-
either DC or Washington State, regardless.
Yes,
it's not
Washington,
Mississippi.
DC.
Just,
Yeah.
that's all out there.
Okay.
Yes.
Apologize for this question. ESP and Mississippi.
I can pull it up from Epicenter.
While we're looking that up, I mean, primarily deal with not our contract. The ESP, right?
While they're filling in the, or they're not meeting, legal.
And so the gentleman that's the dual board member, he's a board member of the Washington Academy and the Global Public Charter Foundation. Also a board member of the Global Academy.
And will she be a board member of Mississippi as well?
Application ending.
I'm printing it out for you.
While we're waiting on those copies, are there any other questions?
I just printed. I thought that was for him. Thank you. Those are two different attachments there they've submitted, and one of them has the agreement behind it, so you can see the full agreement.
President and board member of the ESP.
If you guys would like to look at that, that's actually on the website. So if y'all want to look at that particular document, the proposal is on. It's not in the report that's in your board packet. That narrative that she's talking about.
The condition is to correct it, right?
Yes.
A discussion point at this, right now?
Being sure that Mr. Morgan doesn't have any additional questions.
gotcha.
And then,
Okay.
I will need to ask for an amendment to the motion, and then we'll vote.
I think part of the consideration is in looking at number 3, even though the contract will state or may state there's a maximum of 9% revenue being allocated, the question becomes, how long will the school have to rely on the ESP? At what point will the school be able to sustain best practices that will improve academic outcomes?
I guess broadly speaking, just a few thoughts, kind of ramble, indulge me. We enter into, they have various contracts with them. As long as they have a contract, I think we definitely want them to have a contract. Right? But to get into dictating terms of that third-party contract that we're not even part of, wonder if stepping out a little bit on that. That's not a contract that we're part of.
Correct, but there is in the application itself and in terms of best practices that the authorizers always approve
Sure.
those contract terms between the third-party vendor. And so for them to be able to engage with an ESP or a CMO or a network, whoever they've got that they're going to contract with, the authorizer boards or authorizer, whomever they are, would participate in that and give their approval before they could.
So what they've attached to the application is a draft of what they
That's right.
propose,
That's
but it's not
exactly
the
right.
final one.
That's right.
And they develop final form, we would then have the option to approve that contract. Is that right?
Right. And Dylan, correct me if I'm wrong, or Amy, isn't there some statutory language to back that up on the third party? In the ESP and in the contract, for sure. Yeah. Right. No, a party to it, no,
Right.
no.
But we need to make sure that they have the ability to terminate, that they can continue with operation.
Looks to me like they have the option to terminate here. I don't know.
Or
Yeah, there's a termination provision, so. That's why when I hear, oh, the contract doesn't have a right to terminate, I'm like, well, that makes no sense. If they got lawyers involved, it could be stronger one way or the other, but they certainly have options to terminate. It's a 5-year term. It's not indefinite because they're reflecting 5 years of the anticipated 5-year contract. Well, that makes sense. I see an early termination. There's a termination clause.
Yeah.
So if there's any breach, you can certainly terminate, but I mean, a lot of contracts that don't have a 90-day early term. I mean, I don't know, and maybe this is my legal background, but when I get into demanding that certain people that I'm really not a part of have certain provisions, like that's between them. My view. Now, I know we have to require them to have one, whatever state law we have, but if we're able to approve this contract or this third-party contract later when they finalize the negotiations between them, all we have to do today is approve the application, and we still have the ability to come back and say, wait a second, you need to, before we approve this third-party contract, we'd like to see X, Y, and Z. Like, we can short some of this and just approve the application later once they finalize the contract.
I think we can 100% do that. I think that is absolutely where you don't have to put these conditions on the front end. You can build them into the contract, the third party contract. You can absolutely do that. The board has 100%. Yeah. That afterwards, then the staff and, look at those proposed, yeah, you could certainly do that.
That gives us the maximum flexibility.
Are there other questions and concerns? Comments? What would you recommend? What is the motion?
School-year contract and completion of pre-opening requirements, because that. I understand, Mr. Morgan said.
Add these conditions.
Well, I haven't made a motion. I think there's a pending motion on the table. We're still discussing, but I think what I was suggesting was we have the flexibility to approve and then deal with those conditions once they and the ESP have finalized their version of the contract that we then have to. A couple steps down the line. I think the first step for today,
So if I could just read that, that might help clarify some of your questions too. So it says, should the charter operator propose to enter into a contract with an ESP, education service provider, as it's defined in law, to manage and operate the charter school, the charter operator or governing board in this case, shall submit a copy of the proposed contract to the authorizer for approval and comply with Mississippi Code 372841. The charter operator governing board also agrees to submit any other information requested by the authorizer regarding the management arrangement, including but not limited to a description of the ESP with identification of its principals and their backgrounds. The charter operator shall not enter into a management contract without authorizer approval. A copy of the management contract entered into by the charter operator and approved by the authorizer shall be incorporated into this agreement as Exhibit K. An ESP must be the nonprofit, as it's referenced in statute 372839(2). So it becomes a part of the contract then. So you couldn't execute a contract without that agreement.
the part of the contract negotiation.
Right,
Component.
right.
And what we're doing here today is to approve.
Application,
And then
negotiation, right.
So it sounds like. One of two ways. One, we can all vote and say no. Motion, that might be clear.
Okay. So the motion is to accept the recommendation from Mississippi Global Academy. The recommendation including the 5 conditions. So at this point, if there are no further questions or further discussion, I would like to call for a vote. All those in favor? All those opposed? Nay. The noes have it. So now we need to get an additional motion. The motion would be something along the lines of approving the recommendation for Mississippi Global to accept their application to open and operate in the school year 25-26 upon execution of the charter contract and completion of the pre-opening requirements.
Okay.
Mr. Carney? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The ayes have it. We'll now move to agenda item C. Wanda, I think we are through with you. We thank you so much for your time. Unless you have anything else for us, we certainly appreciate all your efforts.
I do not. Thank you so much. Enjoy your evening.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Wanda. Which may have been the feedback that I was getting, which is why I kept trying to, that's what I was doing. I was like, is this Bluetooth? Anyway. The next action item is to consider approval to proposal to conduct renewal evaluations. I will entertain a motion to accept the proposal from Cognia to conduct the renewal evaluation support. The item C that was on your board. in your-
So moved, Jennifer.
Thank you. Is there a second?
No, we had three total and pattern that we normally do, which is individual, then collective, and then rank them based on. They did this for us last year.
Okay.
It was seamless. We had run in. They did the renewal for Ambition.
Discussion? We'll give her just a few minutes. Probably should have let everybody take a minute of a quite some time. I'm sorry.
Epic.
Appreciate you getting this heat to work in here.
It is brutal, isn't it? I'm sorry, but when we turn on the air, nobody on the YouTube can hear, and nobody in here can hear, and or on the phone, so it's not the best.
Next meeting, we'll ask for shorts and t-shirt weather.
Come a little more comfortable.
Yeah, that would work too.
Somebody should really get in touch with DFA and let them know it's hot in here.
Yeah, somebody that works there might could help us.
You would think.
You would think.
What I hear.
Yeah, yeah.
Again, if somebody knew anybody at DFA.
If anybody. We're all throwing Marcy under the bus here just a tiny bit. Could you
I started
connect
it.
somebody with somebody
I
there?
started one time.
It's hot. Hot.
Loud. I mean,
These, you mean?
I've been in their shoes when I'm
Yeah.
trying to hear and.
Yeah.
and,
It's hard to, and then, yeah, the third floor is really nice with the. I think she would. I think she
If y'all
would.
are okay, if she,
I think she'd had to take a call.
if she, I bet maybe she'll forgive me if I just go ahead and ask for, a vote on action item C. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. All those,
Aye.
any opposed? The ayes have it. Yes. The ayes have it. So we will go ahead. We'll go ahead and move to agenda item D, to consider approval of SR1 contract amendment request. This is changes in their enrollment projections. I will entertain a motion to approve or deny the contract amendment request to adjust enrollment projection for school year 25-26.
Motion to approve.
Just for my, did it go up or down or
Oh, it went down.
down?
And it was contingent upon, when Ms. Cook made that recommendation last time, it was contingent on enrollment not to exceed, I think it was 120%. I don't remember the exact motion, but, okay. But I do know that as of today, we do not have their official enrollment, so we can't go back and forth. We don't have it. They haven't, they're one of maybe two districts that haven't submitted or cleared their enrollment in MSIS at this stage. Tried to connect with them, but don't have that yet.
Any other discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. And for the agenda item E, which is the item we added to today's agenda, for approval of the amendment to the contract with Butler Snow. I think Denise spoke to that earlier. I will entertain a motion to approve the amendment to the contract with Butler Snow.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? I'm being told we need to return to D. I apologize.
Just real quickly, we, and it's not listed on here, but, you know, the school received a memo from us to provide an update to the board on their pre-K program. So I noticed your board chair was here earlier, so I'm just going to look to Ms. Hutton and see if you guys have that, if you can provide that to the board at this time.
It's all good. Nobody's standing on pretense around here.
You want to speak to it then, Ms. Hutton? Yeah, please. Can you, I'm sorry.
Yes, that works. Yes, absolutely.
I hope everyone is doing well today. SL1 CPSA is the charter school, SL1 hosts the charter. Became a part of our charter contract that we, that amendment was ended to have free day. So the suggestion was made. We did seek in our was a request for a letter.
Thank you. I'm
We
sorry you had to
appreciate
wait.
it.
No, thank you all.
Perfect. So unless there's any further business, the next regularly scheduled meeting will be held on December 9th, 2024 at 1:00 p.m. at 239 North Lamar Street, Suite 207, here in Jackson. At this point, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Please identify yourself for the record.
I so move Candace Robbins.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second. Jay Carney.
Thank you, sir. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. The motion carries. Thank you all very much. Let's hope December is a little cooler.
Yeah. That is-